Since the withdrawal of Customs and Border Patrol agents that have been deployed here, the frenzied actions and the news around it seems to have receded, but that doesn't mean that ICE actions have receded. And we're joined by Scott Sakiyama, an Oak Park resident and attorney. He is an organizer and has been an organizer of the protests at the Broadview Detention Center. He's also a rapid response team member. Scott was detained by ICE outside of his child's elementary school in Oak Park while he was warning the community about the ICE presence and actions in the area. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We have not yet met in person, but we have met virtually a few times now. And first, thank you for all you do. And before we start, are you a practicing attorney, and what area of law do you work in?
Sure. First, thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and to talk with you today. I am a practicing attorney. My practice has largely focused on civil litigation, typically in the consumer financial services space, and some in the area of privacy.
I see. So I had this as a potential question, and now I'd like to ask you, before we get into what's going on now, what propelled you personally into the activism around the immigration enforcement?
Sure. So, 80 years ago, the federal government incarcerated my family during World War II because they were either immigrants from Japan or they had, parents who were immigrants from Japan. And the effects of that abuse of federal power have really continued through the generations in my family. And so I think that the immigrant community is something that, I feel a connection with. And also, my family was fortunate that they had a neighbor who held their property for them and then gave it back, so they didn't have to do like a fire sale. And so, I think that is a strong example of members of the community stepping up to take care of each other, and which I think is something that we've seen over the last few months here in Chicago when it comes to federal immigration enforcement activity.
There were so many stories like that during the Second World War era. Was your family on the West Coast at the time?
They were. They were in the Los Angeles area. They spent some time, or they were then sent ultimately to Gila River, Arizona. Which is on a Native American reservation just outside Phoenix there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that background. That sort of wondered. Because the nature of your activity has been much more central, I guess, or it just had a personal feel to it, different from what many of the others out on the streets has been. So thank you for that. If you could, can you sort of speak a little to the current situation regarding immigration enforcement in the Chicago area? Has there been a noticeable decline in seizures of people, for example, over the last few weeks, or is it continuing apace? What is the same and what has changed from, through your lens?
Sure. So from what I'm seeing, with a couple notable exceptions, the activity that we've seen has significantly decreased since Border Patrol, and in particular, the commander, Greg Bovino, left Chicago and went to Charlotte and then New Orleans. And I say with a couple notable exceptions, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was one day that we saw more activity, I think, across the city. And then I think maybe 2 weeks ago, Greg Bovino was in town.
He came back, right? Surprise appearance.
Right. Yeah, and he was around for about 2 days. He was up north in some of the northern suburbs. He was in Cicero, little village. He stopped for gas at Forest Park, very very close to where I live. But those days we did see escalated activity.
And how about at Broadview? What's the situation there?
So I think the protests have, I think, been less well attended. I think that's the product of a number of factors. The weather also, generally speaking, it does feel like there is less activity there for the most part, on behalf of or on behalf of the federal government there. Also, too, there was sort of I would say there was a pretty sharp decline following an incident in mid-November where a number of faith leaders were really very violently assaulted by the Cook County Sheriff and the state police, as well as the Broadview police there. But again, I think that I think it's largely a product of the holidays and the decreased immigration activity in general.
But the center is still pretty full, is my understanding. Do we know really what the status is inside the building?
I think I don't think we do.
We never did, really, did we?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe that the attorneys representing the class of individuals that were being detained there did win at least some access, but I have not really seen any reporting on what they've been able to find out or what the current status there is. Are
you yourself still going out there at all, or is it really?
I've been a few times recently, not quite the same cadence, but I anticipate that picking back up again as we sort of get through the holidays here.
Do they still have the streets blocked off, or do they still have that protest zone?
They do.
Is the curfew still in place? All that crap from the mayor?
Yes. I believe there's been some modifications. But I mean, to your point, the mayor of Broadview and what they call the Unified Command with the local police forces have established this. They've turned the First Amendment on its head, right? Yeah. Where instead of needing to require good reason to restrict First Amendment rights, they are basically starting from we will tell you when and how and where you can exercise your First Amendment rights. And I think some of the barriers have been removed. I think the police force is a little bit smaller than it was. But I think that if you saw a return to some of the crowd size, you'd see a ramp up pretty quickly from the Unified Command there.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Scott. You had, quite obviously, direct interactions with police at all levels, I'm assuming, with state police, with Cook County Sheriff's Police, with Broadview Police, I'm assuming in other locations with Chicago Police. I'm not sure which question I want to ask first because they're all connected.
Right.
Let me start with this one. How would you characterize the four different branches there in terms of their behavior, how you and other protesters experience them and their orientation to you? Starting from the state police and like working your way down the tiers, can you sort of characterize how they've been given what they're supposed to do according to the Illinois Trust Act and the rulings by various courts and judges in the area, the circuit court judge most notably, statements by the governor, like given that context of our rights and the legal systems or the judicial systems statements about the need to protect those rights. Can you comment on those four different branches of police as you encountered them and as your people, like those who you sort of lead and work with other protesters and activists? What has been your experience? Maybe start with the state police.
Sure. So the state police, I think I would say if I was going to rank them, I would say are the most professional. That being said, on October 3rd, when Kristi Noem was in town, the state police worked hand in hand with Greg Bobino to suddenly clear protesters from two zones that they had been allowed to be in from the three previous hours with little to no warning. they've threatened chemical munitions, but have rarely used them. They were involved in the same incident, in that mid-November incident where faith leaders were brutalized. And so on their own, I think that they are probably, if I had to deal with a branch of law enforcement, they're probably who I would choose to deal with. But some of the issue here is that some of what we've observed is the unified command. It is unclear who is actually in charge. I think the Broadview police appear to have an outsized influence, perhaps there, and the Broadview police seem wildly inequipped to handle the situation there. For I think both reasons that they have a relatively small police force, which is how the sheriff and the Illinois State Police were brought in, but then also just from just understanding what their goals are and what they're trying to do there. The Cook County sheriffs, I'd say that a number of them led the charge on really the brutal tactics that the faith leaders were subject to.
Thank you, Tony Preckwinkle. Keep going. Sorry.
Yes, that is
Why does this not surprise me? But anyway.
On October 3rd, when they were involved when Noam was there, and one of my friends reached out to a member of the Cook County board in real time and said, "Hey, we're here, and the sheriffs are helping push around the protesters," and the response was, "Perhaps we can form a commission." So there's a number of elected leaders, I think, who are not really set up to deal with this. I also, individually in talking to some of the sheriffs, I've had a number of instances where they express that they appreciate what the protesters are doing, that they think that they should be out there. But I think some of the leadership there, there's one commander in particular that's often there. I think he's a deputy sheriff or deputy chief. I believe his name's Joe Schofield. And my understanding is that he has a background in the Marines and in either Iraq or Afghanistan. And there's video of him on the day that the clergy were beat up, where they've sort of been pushed back into a line, but he leads this charge to go into a crowd and grab the pastor from Evanston and sort of have him slammed to the ground. And it looks like tactics that really feels just more military than law enforcement. So I think,
except, of course, our military is supposed to be defending our constitutional rights from threats foreign, but we'll leave that aside. So the sheriff's force you found to be the most aggressive, threatening. What about and the Broadview police, the least equipped, you said?
Yeah, I think so. The Broadview police, there are a number of them that appear to be very much police officers that are focused on making sure you're compliant with what they tell you to do. And just by way of an example, on October 14th, I was recording ICE vehicles as they were entering and exiting the facility, which is something that the governor has asked us to do, right?
Correct. Explicitly, right. Yeah. And to post it to a site that they created.
Yes, exactly. And the mayor of Broadview had issued her, free speech curfew. And so the entrance and exit is actually very close to the border of Maywood. So a friend and I positioned ourselves so that we were on the sidewalk in Maywood. Yeah. And we also took the position that we were not protesting, but that we were recording law enforcement, which has its own constitutional rights. But nevertheless, Officer Williams from the Broadview Police told me that the Mayor of Broadview's executive order restricted me from taking photographs of the license plates while I was standing in Maywood, and so he arrested me that day while I was in Maywood. But again, it was really, I asked him, I just said, you're not really contending that the executive order of Broadview applies here, and you're not going to arrest me for it, are you? And he said, well, why don't you find out? And so I found out, but that was dismissed pretty quickly. But that's they seem just very focused on achieving compliance. So it's really unfortunate the way that's turned out.
Any experience with Chicago police, CPD?
I haven't yet had had experience with them in the context of either a rapid response or a protest in the Broadview area. In early summer there were some protests downtown, and those were fairly uneventful with CPD. There was they tried to prevent the blocking of major streets, et cetera, but it was relatively calm. But I would just say, just throwing in there in the early days prior to October 3rd, so for most of September, the encounters were directly with federal agents, and that was just unlike anything I've ever seen. The level of violence and unpredictability, and I think that a lot of people who had been to a lot of protests, just sort of the norms or expectations that they had come to have, simply did not exist with the federal agents.
Just for context for listeners, the last two times I hosted spent really a month and then I think almost 6 weeks trying to get anyone from the governor's office, from state police, from the Cook County Sheriff's, or from Chicago Police Department to come on air to speak to what was going on, to take questions, but also to present their own positions. Blanket refusal from all, most disappointing from the governor's office. Scott, I know you'll agree, the governor's words have been beautiful. His actions have been non-existent in terms of insisting on enforcement of the Illinois Trust Act, defending constitutional rights, preventing abuse by federal authorities or his purview, Illinois police, and the same is true of Cook County President Preckwinkle. We also did try to get her the last time. So much of a blanket refusal. I didn't even try for this show to get anyone from there because you don't even get a reply saying no, we don't want to. You just get ignored. I think it's an important point to make.
I would, can I on that? I would just say, so the way I've heard the governor's office articulate their position is that they've, I made the point that what they have done is establish a security perimeter for the feds there, and their actions starting October 3rd meant that 50 federal guys that prior to October 3rd had been involved in effectively crowd control. Those guys were now free to conduct abductions in the city,
correct,
right, or the suburbs. And the governor's position is maintaining control of the streets was absolutely critical to the National Guard decision, and to their legal position in the case to try to keep the National Guard out of Chicago. And I think, I believe it was the activist Kelly Hayes had just a really great response to that. She pointed to that they could have had the option of proving that it was the feds and not the protesters that were responsible for the chaos. Yeah. And in particular, she pointed to the protest that was brought on behalf of the protesters and members of the press before Judge Ellis, and Judge Ellis wrote a 233-page decision, and it is the effect of it has been stayed by the Seventh Circuit, but nevertheless, it's an incredible documentation of just from so many of the protesters, from information they got from the government about how many guys, so anyway, so all that's to say is another thought that enters my head is, our governor is clearly running for president in 2028, and it would hurt his presidential aspirations if there was a lot of chaos between the protesters and the federal government. And I hope it's more of that. What they're saying as far as their legal strategy is just a choice that they've made, and that it's less of a political issue. But I am a little bit suspicious there.
Scott, we're going to be running up against the clock in a minute.
Sure.
I want to, if you can briefly address, in terms of the extent of protests around the city and at Broadview, were you encouraged by turnout, or were you discouraged by the lack of numbers? I'm quite open that I think it was about 10% of the turnout, or maybe 1% of the turnout that was warranted given what was happening. I was disappointed and remain so across the country, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I certainly wish there were more people out there, but someone asked recently, what gave you courage in 2025? And my answer to that was being at Broadview, standing next to people that I didn't know, but recognizing that we were standing together for the same purpose. And while I wish that there were more people there, the numbers did grow. People who didn't protest were out there, right? There was a group of 15 or so Oak Park moms who I helped a little bit when they did a sit-in and were arrested. So to answer your question, yes, I wish there were more people there, but absolutely every person that was there, I found to be incredibly uplifting, and to just have an incredible sense of community with those people, even if I had just met them.
Well, this is going to connect to the subject of the second hour, but it still disappoints me to no end that when masked people with no ID and no warrants are breaking windows and snatching people out of cars and disappearing them, that it's not just people in that community that should be on the streets. People in South Dakota should be on the streets when that's happening in Chicago. People in Chicago should be on the streets when that's happening in North Carolina or Los Angeles. The truths we hold to be self-evident are supposed to apply to all of us, and when they're violated anywhere, it's the right of the people to rise up, but it's also an obligation that goes along with those rights. So, Scott, thank you for all that you have been doing, continue to do, and I know will do. And I hope more people join you in that effort because we need it if we want to forestall this descent towards fascism that we're well on the way towards. So thank you very much, Scott, for joining us.